So here we are back for another year and another episode of Inside TYPO3. Kendall, it's nice to see you again. I'll be honest, I nearly forgot how to plug the microphone in. It's been so long since we last spoke. Did you have a good Christmas and did you have a happy new year?
I did. I was sick for most of the holiday though, unfortunately. So a lot of downtime, forced downtime, I should say. So both good and bad. It's felt like a long time since we got together to do this. I mean, T3Con feels like it was 6 months ago now. So catching back up to do this special episode is nice. Feeling refreshed in the new year. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Nice, quiet Christmas as well. But no, back to normal. And I think we've got a really, really good episode to kickstart the new year. I've got some news to share on the latest TYPO3 releases, as well as updates on our community extensions. And as well as this, I'll be talking about some of the upcoming events coming to the TYPO3 community. And as well as that, I've got some news on the latest projects that have been given funding or granted funding by the TYPO3 Association as well. Kendall, I know you arranged for an interview during T3Con, and I believe we're going to play it today. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I had the privilege to sit down one-on-one with Marc Thiele, who is the founder and organizer of the very special conference that takes place in both Berlin and Dusseldorf called Beyond Tellerrand. And yeah, we were able to carve out a few minutes at T3Con between everything going on and all the different sessions, including his, to have a conversation, talk a little bit about independent community events, organization. And one of the things that I'll say is, to preface the episode is that we spent a bit of time talking about feedback from people attending the events and how valuable and important that is, for anyone who's involved in this industry. And one thing that stuck out to me was he talked about how making things accessible, even if there wasn't someone in the audience with that particular need, it can benefit other people. So I won't give it away, but there is a portion where we talk about that. And all of that to say, I just wanted to link it back to something that you and I talked about earlier this week, Tom, with Luana, which was keeping the podcast in English. And I think that's something I just wanted to touch on before we go into the episode, because it also is closely aligned with that theme, which is we decide to keep the podcast in English despite having a pretty big German-speaking audience, because we want to keep it inclusive and international to anyone who might be listening in different parts of the world who, can speak English, and that's the connecting language. So,
absolutely. I think we should maybe try and arrange a competition as well, where we can find out which listener lives the furthest away from central Germany as well. But that's for another time maybe. But I think Marc's talk was really, really good. And if to summarize quickly, Marc is a professional events organizer, and he organizes two really big events in Germany. And you could definitely tell that he does it for a living, because his talk was really, really good. And as someone who's in the process of trying to arrange a TYPO3 themed event in the UK, shall we say, his talk at T3Con had a lot of really useful tips and tricks for people who are looking to organise their first event as well. So that's what we got up ahead. We've got a busy year generally in the TYPO3 community this year as well. So I'm going to kick off with some release information and some extension news. Let's start with release news. This month saw the release of TYPO3 version 13.4.3 and 12.4.25, both of which are security releases, and it's recommended that all users upgrade as soon as possible. We also saw ELTS releases this month for TYPO3 version 9, 10 and version 11, which switched over to ELTS in late October last year. Moving on to community extensions, content blocks were a minor release with version 1.1.4 and support for PHP 8.4. Varnish also saw a minor release with version 7.0.1 and support for PHP 8.4. Version 13 of Apache Solo was released in late December with support for TYPO3 version 13. The Crowdin extension saw a major release with version 3 and support for TYPO3 version 12 and 13. And finally, a true Christmas miracle, the Save and Close extension saw a major release with support for TYPO3 version 13. Next we have events. The TYPO3 marketing team have a sprint on the 12th and 13th of February in Dusseldorf at the TYPO3 GmbH headquarters. Places are still available as well if you are interested. Then we're off to Venlo for TYPO3 Camp Venlo between the 14th and 15th of February, with a special city tour taking place before the camp on the 13th. You can find out more about these events and more at typo3.org/community/events. Back in November, the TYPO3 Association launched its budgeting process for Q1 2025. The community were asked to vote on which projects they'd like to see receive funding. Out of the 7 submissions, the following ideas were approved. The incorporation of the XH Profiler graphical interface for DDEV, a one-click TYPO3 playground for demo and local installations, enhanced internal link visualization for TYPO3 version 13, and an interactive guide to TYPO3's backend. To track the status of each of these events, be sure to check out typo3.org over the course of the next 2 months. Next up, as promised, is Kendall's interview with Marc Thiele, recorded live at T3Con 24.
I'm here with Marc Thiele, the founder and organizer of Beyond Tellerrand, a conference that takes place in both Dusseldorf and Berlin. And we're here at T3Con, where he gave a talk yesterday on the main stage about why independent community events matter. So, Marc, if you could give us a little bit of a background about how you got started in this industry, what Beyond Tellerrand is all about, and then we'll go into your talk and how it pertains to the TYPO3 community.
Okay. I try to keep it short because it's I run events for 24 years now, and the background actually is like already planted in my early computer days at when I used the C64, and it was like in kind of a demo group, and we went to all those demo parties, and those had a similar approach as conferences. You gather, you do something together, like different disciplines meet, and there's a project you're working on, in this case a demo. You would then hand the demo over to like the stage, and there would be a competition, and you might win a prize or not, but you did something together, which I always liked in a way, like how the community worked and the friendship and all this kind of stuff. And then after a while, after many years later, I went to my very first conference on myself, which was in Amsterdam in 2001, and I felt as if I would be back home. So I had like the feeling of like, wow, that is like the good old days on the demo parties, right? Like this conference, it was a Flash conference, so Flash was the tool, which also was quite limited, like the C64 was as well. And there were so many people from many different disciplines, like illustrators, there were typo people, there were filmmakers, animators, and they all used the same tool, and for a different reason. And I felt like, well, that's great. I want to do this as well. And that's how I got started into running conferences. Back then, not as my single thing to do, my only thing, but more as one of the many things I did. And then in late 2000s, roughly 2008, there somehow something in my head grew that told me, go fully into conferences. Just do this because you enjoy bringing people together. You enjoy creating a platform, an atmosphere, a surrounding for them where they feel safe and welcome, and then gather people from different disciplines. And that's why the name Beyond Tellerrand plays into it. In Germany, you say über den Tellerrand schauen, which means look beyond the edge of your plate. So it's kind of think outside the box, which doesn't match it really, because I think outside the box is usually something you say if you have a certain problem and you have to think outside the box, whereas Beyond Tellerrand is more general. It's more like broaden your horizon. Think a bit further than you usually do. Look, I mean, you can literally say, like, if you have food on your plate, it's tasty. You say, like, well, I have tasty food, but there's like tasty food left and right as well. So that's the idea of the event. And I really like to see how something that you do with like running an event creates something where so many different people meet and exchange. And like, I really love to watch it from the back of the room and just see people mixing and mingling and chatting and laughing. I really like it.
So when you talk about events and why you got started in it, you said that it felt like home going to that first conference. And I think we've all been to conferences where we've either felt like we're at home and there are a lot of familiar faces and it's a nice rejoining of a community. We've also been to events where they're big, grandiose. You feel a little faceless, lost in the mix, and they both, serve different purposes. But so as we're talking about TYPO3 and really at the heart of what the community is would be community events, which are, organized by people in the community. They're obviously done with love, with attention. And I myself have the first introduction I had to TYPO3 even before working was going to a camp. So I went to the camp in Dresden, and
I was just overwhelmed with the organization and the attention to detail and how warm it felt, you know, as an outsider coming into the community for the first time. So in your talk yesterday, you talked about why independent events matter. And so I'm curious from your perspective, looking at things like TYPO3, Beyond Tolerant, like what is the value, and especially after the pandemic, still bringing people together, what have you seen that has changed with that? And are people still interested in coming together like that outside of the TYPO3 bubble, but just in general? Yeah.
Yeah. So to get to this question, I need to tell a little anecdote. When I was organizing a little roadshow for someone, a company through England, and we started in Brighton, and that was January 2022, I'd say, or 23. I'm not sure. I'm mixing up the years, but I think and it doesn't matter anyways. But it was one of the early ones that we did, and roughly 60 people have been there, and there were 2 speakers, and we had like a little mixer afterwards, like with drinks and pizza. And one person came to me and said, "You know what? It's great that you did this, because I forgot how lovely it is to come together." And that's a point I want to point out. People have forgotten during the pandemic how important and how nice it is to meet people and meet people in real. And what the difference is, in my opinion, any random things that can happen would never ever happen in front of your screen. Workshops, yes. Learning, yes. Maybe even a conference and watching the talks would work, but it isn't the same, because what makes any meeting, not just a conference, a big conference, any meetup really important is any random person you meet. You would not meet in front of the screen by like bumping into that person during getting your coffee or a drink or anything, right? And you start talking, and out of that chat might come like a project or like the next like whatever idea, or you know. So I think that is something that we need to emphasize on again with those meetups, conferences, whatever kind of events, that the interconnection between people is really important. And that's something that's so, how do you say, enriching. Like it is so valuable. And I think it's a value that is hard to sell upfront, but as soon as you have been there, you understand, oh, wow, yes, I get it, you know. Nowadays, even more, like as I said in my talk also, it's like we are so addicted to those screens of our phones, of our computers, which is like a great tool to work with, and it makes a lot of things easy, communication easy. But again, like it lets us forget like how important it is to meet in real life and exchange and communicate.
I myself have worked remotely for quite some time now since the pandemic, and I forget as well how important it is, especially to get outside of my bubble and meet people again. And I think something that was really unique for my colleague Panos and I was that our boss Luana suggested that we come to the camp in Dresden as our first introduction to TYPO3. So before starting work or getting to know anybody behind a screen.
Good idea.
Yeah, so we came to the camp and we went to the warm-up dinner, which is always a really nice aspect of the TYPO3 events and the camps, and we got to meet everybody. And so starting work that following month felt so much warmer and accepting, because I already had met everyone and spent multiple days with them in workshops and dinners. And so I definitely see the value in that. And as we're talking about the value, I was curious on your opinion. So you mentioned in your speech yesterday that it's hard to make the selling point for employers sometimes to go to an event, especially a conference that maybe isn't necessarily, you know, the selling points aren't exactly straightforward as to why they should attend from a business perspective. So I'm curious, as an organizer, what advice would you give to employees that want to participate in like an independent community event? And how could they kind of sell that to their boss as being beyond learning certain professional skills or networking for one specific purpose?
Yeah. It's a tough one to do, because I think, again, here, if the employee has been at the event and comes back pumped and energized and motivated to and comes on, like, has a new technique, a new idea, a new project, a new whatever, and it's like just eager to do something, right? Like wants to like create and do. So it's very productive, I think. The problem really is, how do you sell this upfront? How would you like tell someone, I promise they come back energized and they will do stuff, right? Like, so it is a tough one. I tried to create a convince your boss PDF, but it's really, really hard for me, because again, especially my event is not on a specific topic. So I cannot promise if that person learns anything. But again, I think it is like also like in terms of human relationships, really important to interact. And I don't know. So like my advice would be like as soon as people want to go there and you can afford that, not like just financially, but also like in terms of like having them leaving the office for 2 or 3 days, possibly do that with like whole teams, like 2, 3, 4 people, and they have all the same experience. So they how do you say? So it's a team experience, and that like enriches the kind of like bonding also between them. It's a real great team exercise. Last year in Berlin, there was a team of 10 people from the UK, and they celebrated their 10th birthday of the team of that office, which is wonderful because it's a strong team bonding. It's like a really great thing to do. They did this together. They have the experience together. They have something they will talk about like for years. Then after that, you know. What's the price for that? That's really hard to put on, right? Like, so what can you charge for that, or what would the value be if the employer would know what they gain from that, right? So, yeah, it's really tough. If you can help me with this, I'd be super happy.
No, I think that's exactly the point, though. I mean, for us, the TYPO3 team worked on a convince your boss letter as well, and so there were a lot of brainstorming meetings about talking about what would be the value proposition for us to convince someone to come to T3Con, and it really went beyond, you know, the straightforward aspects of it that you would expect, like that you will learn this, and this. It was also about you're coming to a community event, you're going to be networking, you're going to be meeting with different people, you know, even from the ministry, from the government. And so we really tried to make it more of an experience, and and also with team building, you know, come with your colleagues, have an experience, and then you can, build off of that. But yeah, I think it's really tough. And for us, you know, as well, we host the developer days, we host T3Con, and, you know, for myself as a non-developer, going to the developer days still had a lot of value for me as a non-developer, because I got to listen in on the talks for sure, but also it was a lot about being with the community and getting myself out there and sharpening some of those social skills that were lost during the pandemic, which is a real thing. It
is, and it has been work beforehand. I mean, it's not easy. Sometimes you don't get your ass up, right? Like you sit on your couch and you go like, I was this friend calling me, and he invited me to a beer, and you go like, no, not today. But you know, it's always, if you go then. Oftentimes you go like, I'm happy that I did, because I haven't seen that person for a long time. And it's kind of the same effect with like events. It is work to get up and go like, well, okay, I commit to it. I go to it. I have to travel to it. Have to organize my trip and all this kind of stuff. But again, like the payoff is like really, I think, a wonderful experience most of the times. And no matter to which conferences I go, as my topic is Beyond Tellerrand, I often go to like more technical conferences as well. But quite recently, I've been at one in Vilnius, where it was all about book design and poster design and stuff. So completely different again, right? But it's interesting because those people, if they have a story to tell, no matter about what, it could be a baker or a butcher, it's great. If they have a story to tell, listen, and it's always rewarding to listen to it. And no matter if you want to be a baker or not, like great insights sometimes. And surely you can take the one or other thing that they talk about for your work, right? Like in terms of like approach or attitude. So I think any kind of event driven with a passion thinking or by a passion thinking person has got absolute value, really. And as you say, like you were talking about, like smaller meetups as well, like that are done by the community, and often that is like the kind of infectious thing that happens at events. People go like, "Well, that's wonderful. I want to do something like this," and then they start a meetup in their local city, where they gain 10 people, 20 people, but they do something great for the community, and that's like spreading out, right? So they do gather like another 20 people, and maybe one of those again does this in his city. You know, it's like a good effect, and I've seen that happening a lot of times, that those meetups pop up after people had been to a bigger event, a conference.
And so as we're talking about, well, let me go back. I was recently at the TYPO3 camp in Vienna, and this is going to segue into my next question and something that you touched on yesterday in your talk, which is I was having a wine with the organizers. We did a wine tour in the vineyards of Vienna the night before, which was a really nice touch.
Sounds lovely, yes.
Yeah, to going to Vienna. And the camp was really wonderful. For me, as a non-German speaker, being in the TYPO3 community, it's the one international camp of the year. Well, they also do one in Venlo, but this is regarded as the international camp English in Vienna. So I was very much looking forward to be able to understand the sessions completely. But when I was sitting with the organizer, Volker, he asked me, do you have any feedback on the language being English? Because what we've learned is that most of the people who are attending are speaking German. And do you see the value in it still being in English? And I said, yeah, I do, because it still opens up the possibility to the surrounding regions and to other people to come, there were people from Poland, from Hungary, so it does have this inclusivity to it. But what I'm curious, because you mentioned feedback yesterday, and as an organizer, you said that most of the feedback you've received is always positive or from a good place, that people are just wanting to give you the feedback to really improve the event. And I'm curious, what is the best piece of feedback you've ever received from someone, or one that really stuck with you?
That's a tough one. What was the best piece of advice? Small things sometimes where you don't think of. What would it be? What would it be? Well, one thing I learned, for example, and it's not really has been advice from someone, but feedback more. So 1 year I started to have a captioner, live captioner, who captions the talks, and next to the screen there would be text on a big display. And I, to myself, thought, well, I don't have too many people that are having hearing problems that are deaf. So why should I do it? So I was asking the audience afterwards, I was like, is this helpful for you also? And everybody was like, yes, absolutely. Because, we understand English, but sometimes people speak fast or have a certain accent. And then this totally helped. And I thought to myself, well, it's not needed, right? I don't need it actually, because it's quite expensive. And if I don't have any deaf people in the audience, why should I do it? So, but I stuck with it. Nowadays, I have it. It's like standard now, so it's always there. Like Andrew from Scotland, who types in like what he hears over there in Scotland, or sometimes he's on site. But that's something I wouldn't have done if I wouldn't have asked for feedback for it, right? So again, some things for you might be obvious, but you are wrong.
I think I always watch movies with subtitles on, and even in English, so I completely understand, and it's really difficult, especially, for non-native speakers to be listening to a speech where someone's speaking quickly. So that's a really nice touch, and it also touches on one of the topics at T3Con, which is accessibility. So it is just baked into the experience that you already have that accessibility for someone who may be hard of hearing, who may not be hard of hearing, but just has a hard time, comprehending.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's a great piece of feedback for us. Some of the feedback that we've received about, it's funny because most of the feedback was that the social nights needed to be at the end of the events so that people could celebrate properly, that it didn't kind of, stop the event, when you have it in the middle, then all of a sudden everyone has had this really intense night, and then you have to go back to talks, and the attendance wasn't as lively, so to speak. So anyway, this is all really valuable feedback for us as well. And I'm not even planning the events, but hearing the feedback from the community and how people are eager to let us know how we can improve is always so nice. Valuable.
And even sometimes if it's stuff where you have thought about it and you won't do it for a certain reason, then you have the chance to explain why you do what you do in the way you do it. That people sometimes they don't see the other, see you and that you have thought through, and you go like, no, I don't do this because of, and they were like, oh yeah, sure, makes sense. Okay, yeah, but sorry. And it's like, no, don't be sorry. It's great. I mean, again, what I said is like, if people identify with the event and they connect, they own it a little bit, and they deserve to be able to give feedback to you. Okay, they come back, right? They return back like every year or maybe every other year. No matter, even for the first time, if they have feedback for you, listen. And if you do think, no, that's not valuable for me, maybe explain it, give them a reason why you don't do what they suggest, or you have thought about it, and that's the reason why you don't do it. I think that's always fantastic.
But it's a dialogue, and it makes someone feel, a part of it, and it adds the human element to it, again, as opposed to being at a very massive conference where you're one of many people in attendance. It really makes you feel like you're connected to the event And I will close by asking, you touched on this yesterday in your talk as well, but you said that one thing you wished people knew about events is that, especially for someone who's independently organizing them as you are, that with the tickets, you know, the longer you wait on them, the more of a, I don't know if I'd say burden, but it becomes very stressful on the organizer.
Absolutely.
And so I was curious if you could explain a little bit about that. So just that people would understand from our perspective too, you know, I've been monitoring how the T3Con tickets were doing, and it really comes down to the last, you know,
Yes.
week or so that you're getting a full picture of what it's going to look like. So if you could, just elaborate a little bit on what you talked about yesterday and what's important to know about that.
So especially if someone starts running an independent seller. So what I mean by that is also some individual is setting up the conference and is paying for the conference. It's not a company that has allocated a certain budget for the conference, and they say like, well, that's part of our marketing budget or whatever. But taking me as an example, and many other ways, like Remy Sharp in Brighton, or like Dominic, who is here, like from Switzerland. What we do is usually, especially with the first events, we take the money that we earn through the ticket sales before the conference to already pay bills like flights, hotel, anything that has to be paid upfront for this conference. And if no one buys a ticket, there's no money there, right? So before the pandemic, that wasn't such a big problem for me because my event ran so well that I had built a little buffer. Like I had a bit of money on my bank account so that I could always like prepay the next conference from the one before. But after the pandemic, that got a problem again. And people totally changed in the way they buy their tickets nowadays. Beforehand, roughly 2014 and 15, I was sold out like 2 months in advance and had 200 people on the waiting list. And this is a great thing to have, right? Because you know this event is going to be full, which is always great for the atmosphere. But also you had the money to pay like the bills for flights and anything that you have to put into the hotel again already. And if that doesn't happen, it makes you insecure and like the questions of, will I be able to pay all my bills? And it's something, especially as a small team or an individual, that you don't need, because that blocks you from the actual things, from the content and the stuff that is enjoyable for the attendees. So if you constantly think about like, will I be able to pay all my bills? It is completely a nightmare to organize a conference with this in your head all the time. And I've seen this year, like many events had been cancelled. They were announced, tickets were on sale, and after a while people said like, we need to cancel it because they weren't sure of the poker game if they would win, right? So they have sold 200 tickets, but that would just about like cover the base cost. But you know, after the event, there comes a lot of cost as well. Like the venue has to be paid, the technicians have to be paid, the tech that you rent has to be paid. Well, and if you don't sell more than the 200 tickets, in this case, you just cannot afford it. And if you then like have to pay with your private money and maybe don't have the money, that's not what an independent organizer really needs. So I can only ask people that know the event industry and they go to smaller events, if you could buy your tickets early or convince your boss to get the ticket early, don't wait to the last minute, because it's really stressful for anyone who puts up an event, no matter how small or big it is. But if they organize a passionate out of their passion and they really like into it, it's so unenjoying. So it's like honestly so stressful to organize an event with the money thing in the head, because you know it's not that those people want to get rich anyways. They don't do it like to get super rich, because you don't get rich with this. But at least you want to make sure, A, I want to pay all my bills, and B, well, maybe a small profit would be nice to financially reward yourself for like running those conferences. Yeah.
And so thank you for that, because I think it's really valuable for people to know that. And with independent community events and smaller festivals, and really, you know, you're owning all of this, you know, and it's not a company sponsored conference, things like that. Yesterday in your presentation, you ended with giving some examples of other independent conferences that take place across Europe. And I just wanted, for anyone listening, what advice would you give for searching for independent festivals or conferences or more niche meetups so that people can support people who are doing what you're doing as well and take part of a more intimate or niche kind of setting?
For meetups, one advice I can give the companies, because oftentimes meetups evolve around tools or software.
Okay.
So it would be great if the actual producer of those tools or like the owner of those things would have a platform to advertise those meetups. That would be wonderful. And for anyone who searches like out of the blue, there's things like Design Calendar for design events, for example, or it's like Neon Moray. It's done by Thomas Dahm in the Netherlands, and they collect all those events, and they're doing a really good job in having a calendar where you can actually look into topics. Is that something for me? And you can look into, well, what kind of price range is this event? Because sometimes that also matters, right? You cannot afford an event somewhere for $4,000 or something to go to like Los Angeles or like whatever, but you can afford some event that's 150 euros or like 300 euros, and so you can really sort all this in these tools, and it's quite nice to do.
Well, that's really nice, and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Please.
And I'll also put Beyond Tellerrand and all of that where people can find you. And my last question is, what has been your experience at T3Con this year? You were a speaker, you've attended. Will you be at the awards tonight
Yes,
as well?
I will.
Okay. So what has been your experience so far? And yeah, what's your impression?
I mean, as TYPO3 is also one of my partners for this year's events of Beyond Tellerrand, I thought to myself when I got asked, like, do you think we would be a good partner? I saw like, TYPO3 is not the topic that's going to be like on stage in my event. But as soon as I met the people running this, and as soon as I understood that they understood how valuable those community events are, no matter if they are TYPO3 or even because they are not TYPO3 related. Because, you know, if you always preach to the people that know you already, what's the sense, you know? So they did a clever job, and they also understood. Usually partners of my events get a briefing from me that tells them not to do their trade fair booth, not to go like in a suit, sit behind their laptops on a table, you know, like, because I know my audience. They want to be like connected, entertained in a way, you know, like they want to have something where you can talk about. Like I had one company once have a chocolate configurator, so you could find out like which kind of chocolate are you? So, and you would get a chocolate at this because they would measure your body size, whatever. I don't know how exactly this worked. Again, they took a photo and asked you some questions, and then I was like cornflake chocolate, so I got a cornflake chocolate afterwards. That's great stuff, and I think the people from TYPO3 understood this, and they made a great job in running their booth. It was well attended. It was well received. I got good feedback from them, for them. And then coming to the event, I thought to myself, like, well, I don't work with TYPO3, to be honest. I know what it is, and I had a look back when I was developing websites. But nowadays I run a conference. So it's a bit exotic, but I speak there on stage. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, you run an event that's called Beyond Tellerrand. You know, yeah. So please do the same. Like your topic is exotic, but who knows? Maybe the one or other person will be inspired and understands or has a different view on the stuff that organizers like me do. So yeah.
Well, I found your talk to be very inspiring. Again,
Thank you.
Very in line with what we do at TYPO3, and the events here are so special and so many familiar faces. So it was very nice to meet you. I appreciate you coming to talk with me. And also I hope to be at Beyond Tellerrand next year.
Please, yes.
I wasn't there this year. I live in Berlin, but I will hopefully attend next year. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was the interview with Marc Thiele at T3Con this year, and I hope that everyone enjoyed this special episode and conversation with him. A big thank you to Marc for carving out some time to speak with me at the conference. I know it was really busy and there were a lot of things going on, and I hope anyone listening, has a greater understanding and, appreciation for all that goes into the planning of independent events, and realizes why they matter, and especially as they pertain to TYPO3. So I hope you enjoyed the episode.
To wrap up, when will I see, or where will I see you next? I believe I'll see you at the marketing sprint in Dusseldorf in February.
Yes, so we have the marketing sprint coming up, and there's still time to register. So we'll put the link in the show notes if you're interested in coming to the marketing sprint in February. Kicking off the new year strong already with lots of travel, camps, conferences, so everything is back in full swing.
Now, haven't had confirmation yet, but at the time of recording, we believe that Daniel has landed in Florida and that he is safe. So I think next month we'll see if we can persuade him to come onto the show and tell us a little bit about what he's been doing at the CMS kickoff conference with Janis Boyer in Florida as well. So I think it'd be quite nice to see what he's been up to. And I think it's on everyone's mind in the entire community. I think we're all wondering and worrying whether he got sunburned as well. So we need to find out as soon as we can when he comes back if he's safe and suitably tanned. So that's something to look forward to next month.
That's the burning question on all of our minds.
I like it.
And also, as an American, of course, I'm dying to know Daniel's impressions of the U.S. I see he's already had some American beer and an American burger. So, you basically seen it all at that point.
We should have weighed him before he left.
Yeah, exactly.
And weighed him when he came back. Could we say that? Yeah, we're going to say it. Okay, we should have done that. But until February, I will see you then and take care.
See you next month.
I'll schedule the message to go out in the morning or something.
Okay.
But yeah, it'll be all right.
Cool.
Wicked.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye-bye.
Bye.